not content with just ensuring that people die in his own country. Remember, 330,000 excess deaths from austerity were linked to Cameron and Osborne era policies. It is now found out by Middle East Eye that he threatened to withdraw the UK from the International Criminal Court because Karim Khan wanted to have prosecutions for Yoav Gallant and Benjamin Netanyahu for crimes against humanity.
Especially delightful given that he was unelected into that position as a member of the House of Lords. Former Foreign Secretary told ICC President Karim Khan that issuing arrest warrants for Israeli leaders would be like, quote, dropping a hydrogen bomb, unquote, which obviously not, you stupid man.
I mean, you know what is like dropping a hydrogen bomb? What Israel have done to Gaza.
Dropping all of those regular munitions on all of Gaza, yes.
I mean, you would expect like the total yield of the bombs dropped must be similar to the total yield of an atomic weapon at this point.
Oh, wait, mate, you must be. You literally got hundreds of miles or square miles, whatever, of land just turned to rubble. The British government privately threatened to defund and withdraw from the International Criminal Court if it issued arrest warrants for Israeli leaders, a Middle East Eye can reveal. David Cameron, then Foreign Secretary in Rishi Sunak's Conservative government, made the threat in April 2024 in a heated phone call with Karim Khan, the British chief prosecutor of the court. Less than a month later, Khan announced that she was seeking arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, his then Defense Secretary Yoav Gallant, as well as for Hamas leaders Yahya Sinwar, Ismail Haniyeh, and Mohammed Diaf. In a statement at the time, Khan called for his office and the court to be allowed to carry out their work with, quote, full independence and impartiality. I insist that all attempts to impede, intimidate, and improperly influence the officials of the court must cease immediately, he said.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, yeah. Well, now we know that the public statements he was making about people interfering was literally our government trying to do that.
Yeah. Cameron, a former British Prime Minister who was appointed Foreign Secretary by Sunak in November 2023, phoned Khan while the prosecutor was on the official visit to Vuvuzela on the 23rd of April. MEE can reveal details of the call based on information from a number of sources, including former staff in Khan's office familiar with the conversation who had seen the minutes of the meeting. Cameron told Khan that applying for warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant would be, quote, like dropping a hydrogen bomb, unquote. Cameron said it was one thing to investigate and prosecute Russia for a, quote, war of aggression, unquote, on Ukraine, but quite another to prosecute Israel when it was, quote, defending itself from the attacks of October 7th. Yeah.
And again, right,
I've somewhat editorialized the...
It's worth pointing out as well, specifically, that so much is pinned on October the 7th as the quote-unquote start of the conflict, right? Obviously, if you've watched our channels for any amount of time, you'll know that's a stupid way of pointing this out because the history of Israel and Palestine goes back a long, long time, right? But there's a very specific point here, which is that the war never stopped because there is a specific case of belligerent occupation, right?
Yeah.
There's a constant state of conflict between Israel and Palestine, specifically because Palestine is not a state. It is an occupied territory at this point under the United Nations banner, for example.
Yes.
But that means that if you're a belligerent occupier, you're in a constant state of conflict. So whether or not Hamas committed war crimes on October the 7th, because obviously they did, we've all seen them now. Plenty of people, including the flotilla now, have seen more of those than we have. But right, we all know the reality of the war crimes that were committed. But the fundamental act of resisting occupation by attacking the military targets they did attack on that day as well is very specific to the ongoing nature of the conflict of occupation, right?
Yeah.
So defending yourself from the attacks of October 7th as if you were aggressed upon and you're responding is not the same thing as Russia invading because of their quote-unquote concerns about, you know, the denazification of Ukraine or other such bollocks, you know.
Yeah.
The specific point of saying, oh, they're responding to October the 7th makes you think that this is a conflict started by Hamas, when it absolutely is not.
Yeah. Claimed the warrants would have, quote, profound implications in Britain within his own Conservative Party. Cameron then said that if the ICC issued warrants for Israeli leaders, the UK would, quote, defund the court and withdraw from the Rome Statute, which, I mean, just goes to show you how committed the British government are when it really counts to the concept of the rule of law in the world.
I mean, they have signed up to the reality of the liberal international order, of the international rules-based order, in its not explicit terms, but in its de facto terms, which is that this applies to the East, to non-Western nations. It only applies to the global South and those on the imperial periphery, right?
Yep.
Now, of course, that's not what the nature of the law says. That's not what the word of the law is, but its founding principle is basically undermined by the way it is actually implemented in reality, which is to protect the global north and the imperial core, and to punish those outside of it, right? It's the classic conservative argument of what the law exists to do, which is to protect the in-group and to demonize the out-group. And that's been how international law and how the international rules-based order, quote-unquote, has acted since its inception. And so David Cameron here is just telling you and being open in what we're seeing here. I guess this was closed because it was behind closed doors until it was leaked to Middle East Eye. The reality of this situation, the reality of this dynamic, right? He knows this. He fundamentally knows this when he says, well, it's one thing to do it to Russia, another thing to do it to Israel. So yeah, because international law only applies to people who are enemies of America, enemies of the West, and enemy of the global North.
Exactly. International law until it's inconvenient for us. And then
Exactly.
then we can just remove ourselves, and that's absolutely fine. Article 127 of the Rome Statute, the ICC's founding charter, allows countries to withdraw by written notification to the Secretary General of the United Nations.
And it shows you, I mean, this specific one saying we will withdraw not just in terms of the International Criminal Court, but the entire Rome Statute itself shows you how cucked we are to Israel, right?
Oh,
how fully
pathetically so,
cucked we are, right? In that we will literally give up our membership of an international body, right? Of being essentially at the seat, a signatory to one of the most kind of powerful institutions globally outside of like the United States of America, just because we are throwing a fucking temper tantrum over the fact that they're holding our allies to account rather than our enemies. It's such pathetic, childish behaviour, as well as being monstrous and morally totally bereft.
Cameron, who currently sits as a Conservative peer in the House of Lords, the upper house of the UK Parliament, accused the prosecutor of singling Israel out. Oh, to pull the cut Israel! Oh, you've been mean to Israel.
Like, again, it's just crazy talk. Oh, you're singling Israel out. What, as opposed to the time they've singled out the entirety of the global South and not held anyone from the global North accountable since its fucking inception?
How many UN, have they broken or not complied with? Dozens at this point. What do you mean they're being singled out? They're the worst country in terms of following international law in the world, funded by probably the second worst. It's ridiculous. What are you talking about? He asked why Khan's office had, quote, not prosecuted Iran for its attacks on Israel.
Because they were responding to a belligerent action by fucking Israel. They had casus belli because Israel had literally hit a fucking consulate that is protected by the Vienna Conventions in Syria. They attacked Iranian soil, right? The people, how is it at this point? How am I, this is so fucking topsy-turvy. I have to protect Iran's kind of deference to the international rules-based order because they have been closer to following it than Israel and the West. Right, it's crazy stuff. This is ruled by a fucking insane Islamist dictator in the form of the fucking Ayatollah, right? Someone who has numerous human rights abuses under his belt. And even he has more deference to the rules of conflict and the rules of war and international order than the fucking British and Israeli and American governments.
But also, I hate to break this to the former Prime Minister, former Foreign Secretary, and father of two, David Cameron, but you can't just point to the other kid and go, why aren't you having a go at him? He did it as well. You can't point to the other kid and say he did it, so therefore you shouldn't punish me. No, you have to take the punishment for the thing that you did. Okay? That's the way that works. I can't believe you have not understood this, given that you have, like I say, parented two children. You really ought to have imparted that information to them. You are a role model and a grown man. For fuck's sake.
Also worth pointing out as well, right, that this is David Cameron who's appointed as the foreign secretary, and he's asking Karim Khan, why haven't you prosecuted Iran for its attacks on Israel? Why haven't you, for example, as an ICC, which is for people, the ICJ is for states, the ICC is for people, why have you not, for example, issued arrest warrants to the Ayatollah or for the head of the IRGC or whatever it is, right? But they can't do that because Iran is not signed up to the Rome Statute, and neither is Israel. The reason why ICC has jurisdiction over sending out these arrest warrants to Gallant and Netanyahu is because Palestine is.
Yeah.
And their attacks have happened in a state or in an area that is signed up to the Rome Statute. Neither Iran nor Israel is a signatory to the Rome Statute, so they have no jurisdiction to arrest anybody or to have any prosecution to people in Iran.
He told the prosecutor he would, quote, lose the dressing room and be seen by many states, including the US, as, quote, losing the plot. That's the US, who has many of its major cities currently on fire.
Literally ruled over by a reality TV star. Like, if you don't mind, David, I couldn't give a shit about what the US does or thinks about anything.
Yeah. Cameron further said that if the ICC issued the warrants, the UK would be, quote, required to arrest Netanyahu if he travelled to the country. Yes, I think he might be aware of that, given that that's literally what he is asking you to do. That's literally the point of that, is that you, as a member of the Rome Statute, are required to execute that arrest warrant should those people turn up in your jurisdiction. Yes. Why are you telling him that? Like, that's a thing that needed to be said. Anyway, I mean, technically, it's the only thing he's been right about so far, so let's give him half a point, I guess. Khan told Cameron that his office had engaged with Israel for the past 3 years, but it had, quote, not resulted in any meaningful exchange of material relevant to the investigations, unquote. According to MEE's source, the Foreign Secretary spoke aggressively and repeatedly shouted over Khan, who had to be asked to be able to complete his points. The prosecutor noted that his office was investigating crimes committed by Hamas as well as Israel, but Cameron said that this was drawing a moral equivalence between the two.
Yes, it is. Good.
Yeah.
They should.
Yeah. Because, like, yeah, obviously, like, they're both doing war crimes. The war crime man is going to investigate the war crimes on the both sides of the war crimey crimes. Yes. He stated again that the UK would withdraw from the Rome Statute. Khan replied that, quote, if this were to occur, then he would have to accept that the rules-based system would be dead, unquote. Cameron insisted that, quote, the world is not ready for this, unquote. He told Khan he was, quote, on the brink of making a huge mistake. You sometimes need to take a step back and consider things. But Khan refused to back down and continued defending his position.
It's incredible for Cameron to try and say that the world isn't ready to not accept that the rules-based system would be dead, right? Yeah. Like, no. That's what you're trying to say. You're trying to kill the rules-based order. The world isn't ready, as far as I am concerned, for just continual levels of a free pass being given to things that we are all seeing happen in front of our eyes. That's it, right? David Cameron is specifically saying, no, you have to kill the rules-based order. The world isn't ready for it. Crazy stuff. Yeah.
There was a serious risk that many in the world would view the rules-based order as not being applied equally. Khan thanked the Foreign Secretary for his call, and the conversation ended without the two reaching any resolution. And by the way, Khan, clearly the most polite man on earth, because I'd have just told him to go fuck himself, but, you know, that's just me. Approached by MEE for a response to the exchange, with Cameron, Khan said, I have no comment to make at this time. The British Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office declined to comment. MEE has asked Cameron for comment. When Khan announced he was applying for the warrants on the 20th of May, Cameron publicly called the decision a mistake and accused the ICC of drawing a moral equivalence between Israel and Hamas leaders.
What's interesting as well is that I think what is so telling from the conversation between these people is specifically David Cameron just saying we can do this for Russia, but we can't do it for Israel. Right? Yeah. It's such a massive admission that, like, not only is this being done incredibly underhandedly, right? It shows that actually this isn't being done out of malice. Really, it's not being done maliciously, I think, right? Because you can clearly, he's very angry about this. They're lost in the source. Yeah. They really are lost in the source, right? They genuinely, fully are entirely sold on this idea that Israel gets a free pass that Russia shouldn't get, and that actually anyone who undermines that is the one who's in the wrong, right? You can't be this kind of fervent in your defense of this, whilst not understanding and seeing the obvious glaring hypocrisy, unless you're just ideologically committed. Which I think is really, really telling here, because it would have been a lot calmer and a lot more like matter of fact if it was about the idea, well, the West and the East are different here. No, he genuinely is fucking absolutely furious at the idea that there would be an equivalence between Russia and Israel in this position.
Yeah, mad shit. Where are we? He claimed that, quote, "No one, I think, has been tougher on the Israelis than me in direct call after call and message after message about having to meet their obligations," unquote. I mean, that says it all. If you genuinely think that's true, David, because you weren't tough on them at all in any way. So, like, yeah, look, if you were the most tough, that, I mean, to say you're treating them with kid gloves, you know, would be an understatement, I feel.
This was the same guy who, in the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, when being questioned by the chair, Alicia Kearns, at the time, said, first of all, that he didn't know whether or not the Gaza Strip were counted as being occupied under international laws, right? He's not just evil, he's also stupid, right?
Yeah.
And on top of that, couldn't at any point, quote unquote, recollect whether any paper had passed his desk saying that he'd been given notice by the civil service that they would have to stop Israeli weapon shipments and cancel those licenses of arms being sold to Israel because there was a risk of them being used to break international law that literally everyone on the planet knew that there was at the time, right? When, of course, we now know from internal leaked documents and from leaked audio from Alicia Kearns that they had already been given this notice by people that there was a risk that these weapons would be used to facilitate war crimes, and David Cameron did fucking nothing, right? He is totally complicit. He is totally 100% complicit in this, and I do not believe for a second that he just forgot about those papers that passed across his desk. I am fully of the opinion that he saw those things, he saw those same information that was seen by Alicia Kearns, that was seen by the civil service, that those Israeli weapons shipments and those arms licenses should be cancelled because of it would leave our government at risk of being complicit in the facilitation of war crimes, and fucking ignored it. I'm firmly of that belief.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm of no doubt whatsoever that that's the case, yeah. On the 10th of June, the Conservative government filed an objection to Khan's application to the ICC, arguing that the court did not have jurisdiction over Israeli nationals, a position the Israeli government has held for years, and a position that the British government previously had never held. But okay. The next month, Keir Starmer's newly elected Labour government announced it would drop the objection. "We're very clear about the importance of the rule of law and independence of the court both domestically and internationally," a spokesperson for Starmer said.
Again, a very, very funny comparison to make here. This is David Cameron essentially saying that he has even more contempt for international law than a man who went onto the radio live to say Israel has the right to commit war crimes, right? That's how far gone David Cameron is.
Although at least there is one area in which a right-wing politician is to the right of the current Labour government, so that's nice.
On that point of saying, well, there is someone who is now a Conservative who's to the right of the Labour government, is that, well, David Cameron was always the most right-wing person who had been in a high-up position in the Conservative Party since 2010. He had this kind of public persona as being like a liberal Tory, right?
All that hugger hoodie bullshit, yeah.
Exactly. Like, he was always seen as a liberal Tory, when in reality his policy prospectus was the most right-wing of any of the leaders on both fiscal policy, on internal policy, like the go-home vans, the hostile environment. That's Cameron-era government, you know? So they were clearly the least liberal. They were the most kind of hawkish on terms of economic policy, and you see the results. I mean, you look at what they were wanting to do, what even the opposition wouldn't do in things like Syria.
Syria and Libya as well, turning both of those into basically failed states, yeah.
Exactly. So on foreign policy, on domestic policy, on economic policy, on everything, they were the most right-wing government, literally. I mean, what's interesting as well is that Ed Miliband whipping MPs to vote against the first set of Syria strikes was cited by Barack Obama as something that stopped intervention in Syria in its tracks at the time, right? It shows you how far we've fallen in terms of the Labour Party's approach to international politics. That, like, Ed Miliband, I can't remember the cabinet, his leadership is so far removed from how Starmer is approaching things like international conflict at this point in time, right? It's really because so many people try and say, oh, well, lefties, they refuse to appreciate the current Starmer government. They're just middle of the road, centre left, doing that. They're not too far removed from what you say that you want. I'm like, no, they clearly fucking are, right? Yeah, the gulf between the politics of Miliband era Labour and the politics of Starmer era Labour, they're fucking oceans apart, right? They're oceans apart from each other. And so people try to think that the people who are angry with Starmer are just like bitter Corbynites. I mean, there are plenty of like soft left, long-term Labour voters who are fully in support of Ed Miliband, who voted throughout the Blair years, who find Starmer's government beyond the fucking pale. It's not just a bunch of Trotskyists who are mad that we're not implementing full communism. It's the fact that Starmer is just a monster. He's just a total honest-to-God monster.
Yep.
Well, apparently not as much as David Cameron.
Sources Khan spoke to in the hours following his phone call with Cameron told MEE he seemed surprised and upset by the exchange. Quote, "I don't like being pressured," Khan said, according to sources present at the time. Quote, "I don't like being, I won't say if it rises to blackmail, I don't like being threatened." Well, it is. It absolutely is blackmail. It's, nice international agreement. Shame if one of the major players in it's sort of pulled out. It's mafiosi. Like fucking, if you do this, we will do this. It's a direct threat. It's blackmail. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
100%. Look, he's literally saying in that bit about the rules-based order stuff, like the world isn't ready for this. In other words, don't make us destroy the rules-based order in order to protect Israel. Just don't do the arrest warrants, basically.
Yep.
Which is pretty grotesque. Khan added that the sentiment is not unexpected. The goal of articulating it is so bluntly and candidly, I think, was a surprise and a disappointment. Countries that you love, that deserve better. How on earth can leaders have held such high office that are so well known think you can get away with that? Because he went to Eton and Oxford, he thinks he can get away with fucking anything.
When he's gotten away with literally everything ever for the entirety of his adult life. And probably during he was a kid as well, right? He's been mummy's special little boy, having been given a gilded education, both at private school and at University of Oxford, be just kind of floating on like a magic carpet of the easiest possible ride through life anyone can get, being essentially felt like he had a divine right to rule as both a Conservative MP and then as Prime Minister, right? Never had a real trouble in his life, gets into government, like implements policies that kill hundreds of thousands of members of his own country, and then just fucking swans off into irrelevance and then lobbies for his fucking financial institutions in the background directly with the Chancellor of the Exchequer on fucking WhatsApp.
I was about to say, the one time he ever faced any hardship, he lost a referendum, he instantly went, oh, fuck this, and left.
No consequences. Not a single consequences have ever befallen David Cameron for the absolute fucking wreck of the country that has been left in the wake of his failed leadership. And then he has the gall, after all of that, to do like fucking Twitter photo ops in food banks that are a result of the societal collapse that he created. He is patient zero for every single problem in the modern era of politics, right? And going there going, look at me, I'm helping. I'm just like, genuinely.
Get in the fucking trebuchet, motherfucker.
Absolutely, just immediate, straight to Tesco Gulag, do not pass go, do not collect your £150,000 a year fucking severance pay that he gets for having previously been Prime Minister. What a...
True. British prosecutor added that if you do that to a director of public prosecutions, it would be a criminal offence, potentially. He said he was, quote, disappointed that a country like that and leaders that are so senior would debase themselves and their nation.
True.
Very true. They have no right to debase a nation. They're debasing something they have no right to debase, which is a people.
Strong words and great words, you know.
Honestly, get a wheelbarrow for this bloke to carry his bollocks around in. Absolutely amazing stuff.
Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership. It's just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.